Welcome. Greetings from the ancestral land of the Nooksack people, what is now Northwest Washington State. I'm Bill Pinar. I'm honored to host today's launch of the Hongyu Wang's remarkable new book, Contemporary Daoism, Organic Relationality, and Curriculum of Integrative Creativity. Our format is panelists. Hongyu will present a short summary of her book, followed by a question posed by each of the panelists, starting with Dr. David Geoffrey Smith, followed by Dr. Shen Li, and concluding with Dr. Ying. Each exchange should take no longer than 10 minutes. So at the 45-minute mark, I'll open the floor to those of you in attendance should you have questions or comments. I'll conclude the event at the 60-minute mark. Please note that we are being recorded. Unless speaking, please mute your devices. The event will be uploaded later to YouTube. Professor Hongyu Wang is one of the most important curriculum theorists working in the world today. Her publications are widely admired and cited, among them, The Call from the Stranger on a Journey Home, Nonviolence and Education, Cross-Cultural Pathways, From Parade Child to the King of Chaos, The Complex Journey of William E. Dahl Jr., teacher-educator. And now, this breakthrough book on Daoism and education. Dr. David Geoffrey Smith was born in 1946 in Chongqing. At the age of 2, he and his family were expelled from China. But as he writes, unfortunately, it was too late. China, a love of all of those elements, defining the deepest and most enduring characteristics of China and its people. Hence, even now today in 2021, the year of the ox, Daoism and education. After coming of age in China, Dr. Shen Li studied at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education at the University of Toronto. After graduating, she taught at the California State University at Long Beach, where she served as the director of the master's program in curriculum and instruction. Now, Professor Emerita, Dr. Shen Li remains engaged in the narrative inquiry of educational experience through a Daoist lens. Dr. Ying is a postdoctoral fellow at the University of British Columbia, where she also teaches courses in UBC's Bachelor of Education program. A high school teacher in China for 7 years prior to pursuing her graduate study in Canada. Ying is very much interested in Eastern and Western wisdom traditions, determined to bridge these divides in classrooms, exploring, expanding, and living her key question: what does it mean to be a good teacher? Now, let's hear from Professor Hongyu Wang.
Well, thank you everybody for being here. I'm touched that you're all here at the end of the semester. My thanks to Dr. Pinar for hosting this event and his longtime support of my work. I also thank 3 panelists, Dr. Smith, who's a pioneer in East-West inquiry, Dr. Li, who knows Daoism much more than I do, and Dr. Ma, who offers new insights. Appreciate you all. So I'm going to do a really brief description of the book, and I'll use the plain language as much as I can to demystify Daoism. Let me start from the title, Contemporary Daoism. It refers to what emerged and flourished in the 1990s in mainland China, what is called as a contemporary new Daoism. Its a basic motive is to renew Daoism to address contemporary concerns through integrating with other Chinese schools of thought and Western thought. I only pick up the part between China and West lenses. Organic relationality. I think I make up that word, but basically in this book, it refers to the naturalistic principle of Daoism, and it's an interdependent worldview, particularly the nature of relationship, how to make it mutually beneficial and enriching. Integrative creativity is the central thread of this book. When we talk about creativity, we usually use the word cutting edge, groundbreaking. So especially here, so it implies a strong sense of separation. But in Daoism, creativity is integrative in the sense that it connects rather than separates. So in the book, I used the two intertwined layers of integration. First is the how integrative orientation is inherent in Daoism through yin-yang dynamics. And yin and yang coexist, they interact, they can even change into each other at the extreme, but they never can eliminate each other. So this is the dance between the light and the dark, must be based upon dealing with tensions, differences, and yin and yang as opposite cosmic energy. So also between oppositions. This is a photo, Canadians may recognize it. It's a garden photo. And from it, you can see how diversity is both essential and generative of the aesthetic creation, and also in terms of ecological system as well. You have to have diversity in order to have ecosystem, but the diversity also mutually enrich and enhance each other. The other layer I already mentioned, trying to integrate between Taoist and Western creativity. The book was actually finished the last year during the pandemic. So at least for me, I was awakened by the thread of interdependence, and I see it as the foundation for healing the broken web, whether it is social, cultural, ecological. It's no longer just global, it becomes planetary in terms of scope. And certainly the creativity that integrates and connects, I think is urgently needed in the contemporary society. So that's the central message I want to convey through this book. And then in the book, first, I try to reformulate Dao as dynamics, and that is what was talking about, much discussed in the 90s in mainland China. And then I teased out 4 layers of juxtaposition and dialogues between Taoist and Western creativity. The first one is way and self-organization. And particularly, I want to acknowledge my doctoral advisor, William Dao, who passed away a few years ago, for his help in me to be able to look at Chinese aesthetics through the lens of fractal and complexity theory. The second layer is about creativity of the inner world through the integrating opposites in Daoism and in Carl Jung's theory of individuation. The third layer is really about something unique to Daoism, because if you read Dao De Jing, it's all through Dao De Jing in terms of emphasizing on the role of maternal creativity and the strengths of the feminine in its interaction with masculinity. So it does have some resonance with ecofeminism and post-structural feminism. And certainly they're not, in the classical formulation, it was not about pro-women or any other gender minority, because throughout Chinese philosophy as a whole, femininity and masculinity exist both within women and men, and exist in everything, not only every person. But its unique privileging of femininity is very informative for today. So the last layer I pick up is the theme of co-creativity through peaceful knowing, being, and interbeing. And it's an intersection with Western peace study. Through these different layers of analysis, I kind of synthesis Daoist creativity in human and cosmic creativity and its interaction with Western creativity. And in the chapter, some of the limits of Daoism is also addressed. Builds upon all the discussions in the previous chapters related to curriculum and pedagogy. The last chapter really situated in the field of curriculum study to reimagine curriculum of integrative creativity. I know it doesn't tell you much, but hopefully the conversation with panelists can give you more clarity, and then the question and answers part. So I'm going to pass it to Dr. Smith. In his comments and questions. So do you want the slide now, or you want to start to talk and then I show the slide?
Unmute yourself, David.
What?
Unmute yourself.
Oh, okay.
David needs to unmute. Oh.
Telling me to shut up, I don't know.
Okay, anyway, I'll just share it. You can talk.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Okay, first of all, I wanted to say thank you to Hongyu and also to Bill Pinar for this invitation to participate today. And also, Hongyu, I think your book is an amazing achievement in its comprehensiveness and what it can open up for us in the field of curriculum studies and education, but also as human journeyers, as we might describe ourselves. The piece that I've chosen to identify is actually a little story that comes out of the work of Zhuangzi, who is, after Lao Tzu, probably the most important of all the Taoist philosophers. It's a story that speaks of, it's a story about a woodworker whose name is Ying, and he was consigned to write he was a woodworker, and he was asked to produce a work of art for the ruler, asked by the ruler to produce this work of art. And when it was produced, everybody was just so amazed. They couldn't believe it. They felt it was something miraculous. And so he was asked, Qing, the woodworker, was asked, how did you do it? And this is what he said. And I'm reading it now. Your servant is only a worker. What techniques could I possibly possess? However, there's one thing that is unique to me. When I'm getting ready for making the stand, that's the work of art that he's produced, I dare not waste my energy. So first of all, I fast to still my mind. After fasting for 3 days, I no longer have any thought about reputation or rewards. After fasting for 5 days, I no longer have any thought about blame or praise, skillfulness or clumsiness. After fasting for 7 days, I suddenly forget that I have 4 limbs and a body. At that time, I have no thought of ruler or court. I'm so concentrated that all of the external distraction disappears. Only then do I enter the mountain forest and observe the heavenly nature of the trees until I find one of a perfect match. I can see a completed bell stand, that's the work of art, already in it. Only then do I begin to work. Otherwise, I would not start. I allow the heavenly energy within me to match the heavenly energy in the natural shape of a tree. This is probably why wooden stands are considered made by the fairy. So the question that arose for me has basically 2 parts, but it's around the question of discipline. You know, the word discipline, as we all know, has to do with following, and it can be following a person, it can be following an idea, it can be following a path, or what have you. But implicit in that following, in that notion of following, it seems to me, is the concept of discipline itself. That is to say that something is required of us. It doesn't just happen by itself. It makes a demand. And so my question to Hongyu is basically, what would you understand to be the nature of discipline in the project of following the Tao? And what would be its character as we work things out in the context of, say, teacher education and teaching itself? I say now, when I think of discipline, that came to me on reading this, it seemed to me there were 2 aspects of discipline. There's the action of following something, and then there's the action of what becomes manifest as a consequence of the following. So would you mind elaborating a bit or considering that question of discipline in the following of the Tao? Thank you.
Thank you. This is one of my favorite stories in Zhuangzi, and a lot of stories in Zhuangzi are fables that he wants to make, you know, certain points. The story, if I can tie it to the notion of creativity, and you can see from the process of creation here, something new is given birth, right? But giving birth to something new here is through a process that involves meditation, intuition, and the aesthetic creativity. Really is to use David's language, is to following the path of Tao, in the sense of becoming you know, in communing with the spirit of cosmic energy. So the following, in the sense, first about empathy, the self, and to become more receptive to what can be given by the forest and by the tree, and through those activity, he was able to see the image of the wood stand before he actually put it into material forms. If you know, use the term of discipline, you can see that the discipline of meditation is shown very clearly. First, you know, meditating 3 days for a particular purpose, and 5 days, and then 7 days. And the last one is the longest one in terms of being able to transcend the self. So it is a discipline, not in the sense of what we usually think in the classroom in terms of management or external imposition of regulations, but in the sense of being able to follow the Tao and become unified with the energy of the universe. I'm not sure, I understand the discipline, but I'm not sure it's a language I prefer to use, David, to describe the creation process that Daoism advocates. Because the notion of emptiness in Daoism may be a little bit different from Buddhism in terms of seeking complete liberation, but in Daoism, it's not a complete void. And really it talks about, is about detachment, but the detachment in the sense of not becoming excessively thinking or feeling or doing something. And that's the wandering mind we talk about in trying to practice meditation. Because Taoism is a natural philosophy. It regards desires, feelings as natural, rather than something you have to really, constrain. So I would prefer to use other terms to describe similar, ways of following the pathway. For example, cultivation. It is through cultivation of virtues and the creativity within to be connected with the cosmic, energy or attunement, or even transcendence of the self, because discipline has such a strong baggage. I'm a highly disciplined person, but when I practice meditation, it's such a slow process. It didn't really contribute much to the, because of the way, and I think I bring my own backgrounds into thinking about the term discipline as well, because I went through very, very highly competitive educational system. Discipline was all we had. But it never really reached the realm in terms of being united with the universe. That it was heavily only emphasizing on intellect, analytical reasoning, all of those things. I think Minfang and other who's from China, like, a little bit similar to my generation, knew what I'm talking about. Now everything is changed, not the same. But so I have the biases about the term discipline, and that's why I would like to ask you, David, to clarify more on the term discipline, what you mean by that.
I don't want to take up everybody else's time. So, Bill, do you have I do have a response I want to make.
Why don't you a quick follow up and a couple of minutes? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, for me, the notion of discipline simply points to the issue of difficulty, actually, because following the Tao is not that easy.
Yeah. Okay.
It demands something. In that quotation, he doesn't use the word meditation. He uses the word fast. And you can tell by the shape of my face, fasting is difficult for me.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
And
it does take like Tai Chi. You see it really, when you see it, it's an effortless movement.
Yeah.
But actually, it's very difficult to learn. It took me 3 times to learn the basic form of Tai Chi. So there is a discipline involved. It's the interaction between the discipline of concentration and a broader view of what is.
Sorry,
yeah, go ahead.
Pardon me for interrupting. I wanted to show something because in that story, there's some very clear identifications about what makes the discipline difficult. And so I'm going to see if I can call this up here. Can you see that? Does that show?
No.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. So the discipline of Tao is so here he sort of itemizes it. First of all, don't waste your energy. Don't waste energy. Now we live in a time when wasting energy is pretty much all we do, except it's all through our fingers, basically, as we watch our cell phones and so on. Don't worry about reputation or rewards. Well, if you live in the academy, it's all about reputation and rewards. We're producing a generation of young scholars who are being trained into fund management and going after rewards. I mean, it's terrible. No thought for adeptness. In other words, don't be so concerned about yourself and whether you're competent or incompetent or whatever, but just put those things aside and get on with it. Forgetfulness of the body, the sort of same sort of thing. That reminded me, many years ago, I went to China to visit my birthplace, and went to the Daoist mountain and to the temple, the Daoist temple of Chongqing. Anyway, I forget.
Yes.
Anyway, and we had to climb right up to the top of the mountain, and there was the Daoist priest or monk or whatever, and thinking about forgetfulness of the body. His body was a total mess. He was filthy. His hair was wild. He was unclean. His clothes were all in shreds. But the thing about him was, his face had an immense radiance, and his eyes twinkled like the stars. So here's another one here. No thought about authorities. He calls it the ruler or the court. That's not easy to live out. It's not easy to live without thinking about the nature of authority. External distractions disappear. Observing the heavenly nature of nature, and this goes on to the one at the bottom here, allowing the heavenly energy to match the heavenly energy in nature. And that's the fundamental Taoist principle, that the Tao of heaven is the same as the Tao of earth. So heaven and earth are the same thing. And that the point is that we, as I keep telling everybody that I know, we already live in paradise, but you got to be able to see it. And but it takes discipline because of all this problem of distraction, and living in the age of distractions is what makes following the Tao extremely difficult, and it requires discipline. That's all I'm saying there. So,
okay. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I think.
All right.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree that it needs a lot of discipline. At the same time, I think it's related to how to go beyond the self to see the bigger, realm. Yeah. And so, yeah.
Good. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Doc. Thanks, Hongyu. All right, Dr. Lee.
There we go. Okay, I have unmuted myself here. Thank you for everyone. And Hongyu, the book is unbelievably beautiful. And I just have one note, but Dr. Smith, I just found out you and I were born in the same city. Probably the Taoist mountain you went to is something I went to when I was a child. Hongyu, I always liked your writing, as I have told you before, but to read this book is different. I somehow feel it's therapeutic and it's healing. And I couldn't pinpoint why was that. And now, while I'm thinking more about it, I think the reason that I feel healing is because I feel injured personally and intellectually and even spiritually in these past few years for a lot of reasons. The ecological reasons, the political reasons. I live in the United States, and culturally, and I feel like assaulted and injured on all kinds of levels. Reading your book make me reconnect with something that is so powerful. I feel it's therapeutic and healing. So that's one comment I want to make before I get into the question. And do I have the screen sharing? Let me see.
Yeah, you can share the.
I can share screen, right? Okay, let me share my screen. I have a question. Oh, it's not fully up yet. Go. Oops, not moving. There we go. Come on. Okay. I have a question, and I have so many thoughts and feelings I want to share with you, but we have 10 minutes. So I took a quote from your chapter 7, and under the subheading attunement and improvisation. And the quote is, but attunement and improvisation are contextual, while attunement is more of a process to achieve creative harmony, and improvisation is more of a situated creative act. They complement each other. So my question about this is that the clarity of these two concepts that you made here is astoundingly beautiful. And I would like you to share with us how you have reached this point about the two concepts. I'm going to stop sharing. So, oops, how do I go? There we go. I can listen to you.
Well, when I was, thank you for your question, because that was something that I had to think for a while to come up with talking about both in the last chapter. I was already familiar with improvisation when I wrote the book, especially through Ted Aoki's lens, and something that Dr. Davis is very familiar with. And he emphasized about the living wholeness from which improvised creative act is situated. And he uses the music, jazz musician to show how the instrument and the person can be united. And that's very much resonant with Daoism, because that sense of, because the highest creative act is the union, is from the union between the self and the universe. And to be able to, unite music, musician and instrument into a higher level of unity is something that he discussed in the curriculum in a new key. So, but then at the time, I also just read Dr. Pinar's new book on grant, and talking about this. There's a chapter on attunement, talking about attunement, including 3 components: quietude, listening, and transcendence. And that's very much connecting with the Daoism, even though certainly Grant's notion of God is different from Lao Tzu or Zhuangzi. In philosophy, they don't have this notion of God, but they do have the notion of virtue and what is good in terms of transcendent and move towards. So the attunement, both as embodied and transcendent process, because I was trying to figure out, attunement and improvisation, what's the difference between, and and finally, as I think about all kinds of stories in especially in Zhuangzi, they have many stories, and it seems to me that attunement is more of a process that can lead to improvisation. Just as Dr. Smith's example, the story about the woodworker, you can clearly see the process of attunement that leads to creative, act, improvisation when the image emerged. And the attunement was first about attune to yourself and to empathy out like, discipline of Tao that Dr. Smith talks about, that to peer all the external concerns, reputations, and to reach the point when one can go beyond the self. That is a process of attunement. And then it is within. And then the attunement to the outside world, to observe trees, to get in touch with the spirit of the forest and choose the most find the most matching trees. The term is an important one. Matching it didn't say the best one. It's not the judgment of best or good or bad. It is the matching one. And that is another layer of attunement. And so I see this concept is pretty important in terms of pedagogy, teaching process, and so the so I kind of put both of them together. I think they all both resonant with the Taoist creative process and creative act, and so that's the process of coming up with both of them. I know that you have your own works on improvisation and maybe on attunement. Do you want to share your own insights with us?
Mine was very how do I say that, underdeveloped. I had my master's degree thesis on improvisation, but it was very, as I said, underdeveloped and vague notion. I always said, oh, Daoism is vague. So I'm okay with it. Basically, I was intrigued by this cultural anthropologist, Mary Catherine Bateson. So the 1990, I believe, the book is called Composing a Life as a Work in Progress in improvisations of five extraordinary women's lives. So in her book, she uses improvisations to describe particularly women's life as their lives pass or tend to be more interrupted. and either personally, career-wise, and or societal and political. But they have a way to find their or create their new and continuous lives. And that seems to be, they spoke to me a lot about my own personal experience in life. And I view it from a Taoist point of view about how you, at some point in life when there's a crisis, you improvise something in order to survive. So I called that as desperate improvisation. Because you're desperate, you have to live. You don't want to die or go really, really bad. So one example is during the Cultural Revolution, and Mao sent people like me, kids like me, to far away remote areas to work in a field. So at the moment, everybody was putting on a boat, like a cramp you in the, what do you call like very crowded on the boat, and your family are not supposed to come to say goodbye to you. Everybody, all the kids were crying because we have to go on the boat for a day and a night, and then whole day of bus, and then walk on foot for a whole day in order to get the place where there's no electricity, no sewage, nothing. So you just, and now it's a luxury, but at those years, it's really hard life. So everybody was crying, and I looked around. I was the youngest one. I started to laugh. I started to laugh at one of my friend who is a boy who is crying. The boy is not supposed to be crying. I laughed at him. And years later, when I think back, why did I laugh? That's an odd thing to do. And why am I doing that? So that was the first thing I recall, that I feel very sad as well. I feel confused, but I just don't want to let those feelings overcome me. So I created something that's more, I guess, more tolerable. So that's what I call desperate improvisation. And things happen repeatedly like that. And slowly, I realized as improvisation become a life skills now for me, whatever happens, it's like I have practiced improvisation. And so in later lives, I get a lot more of those interruptions in life, in all kinds of situations of work, study, immigration, and family life, and all of that. And more recently, it's just like all this pandemic, like everybody else, and also a lot of things. So I realized I'm doing that not out of desperation, but like with confidence, and still with difficulties, but with confidence, as if I have established skills. I call that established improvisation. And it comes to work to teaching as well, because I'm a teacher educator. So I found that the day I feel I prepared fully is not usually the day the class went the best. And it's the day the class went the best, usually on the day I didn't think I prepared fully. So in the back of my mind, I'm more alert, I'm more attentive to students. I'm more attentive to myself as well. So there is more creativity, there is more excitement, there is more engagement. So that's what that's why improvisation means to me. So when I connect to Daoism, there's a lot of Zhuangzi's stories about improvisation. One of the stories I don't have the quote with me is Zhuangzi and his disciples were sitting by the river and observing Confucius and his disciples talking about these rapids in the river and get scared of it. And then Zhuangzi's disciple just jumped into the river, flew with the current back and forth, and came out alive and happy and laughing at the Confucius when they were worried about how to get in there. You cannot survive. You don't have the discipline. And so what the Zhuangzi sage says, you just be creative. You go with the flow, and you always find something you can work with, and that's what life is about. So that's my understanding of the improvisation. I didn't have this. I didn't develop it as much as you have, and then it was so. It just. I don't know. It just. Oh, a light bulb came up. Like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us.
Very much. Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Lee. Dr. Ma.
Hello, everyone. It is my great honor to participate in Dr. Wang's book launch panel. And so first of all, I hope to thank Dr. Wang for the incredible book. So for me, I think it is more than an intellectual journey while I was reading this book. It was also a very aesthetic, poetic, spirited, and meditative companionship, reactivating lots of memories in myself. And with these memories flowing to me in their energy and gentleness, I chose to quote on play. So I believe play in its spontaneousness and improvising moment listens deeply to the vitality of life and could interweave with organic relationality, self-organization, consciousness and non-consciousness, self-creativity and co-creativity, which are mentioned in Dr. Wang's new book. So I will read the quote now. The quote I choose is, while play is often used in American elementary school education as hands-on activity, playing with ideas and relations to infuse creative energy, playing with limits to transcend boundaries, and playing with difference for creativity are seldom conceptualized in education, but all exist in Daoism. Daoist humor encourages teachers and students to play with and make sense of subjectivity, science, and society. Playfulness spins the wheel of peace to make it move in a spiral to teach a higher level of awareness. So when I read this quote, it really reminds me of Nuwa, the mother goddess of Chinese mythology, dragging string across mud with a dance and throwing into the air to make human beings. She didn't mold the mud with seriousness. Rather, she used the spontaneous energy to transcend the boundaries and playfulness and playfully make the human beings with difference. I believe it is both an earthly and transcendent playful dance of the goddess with vitality of life. Play in Chinese is war, which has very divergent meanings etymologically. So in Guoyu dictionary, I find that it could mean defiance in 玩世不恭 or appreciation in 赏玩, as well as study 直玩反复不能失手. So it seems that Daoist plays in its own intentionality transcends the dichotomies of play and study, defiance and attunement with organic and relational creativity. I'm wondering if Daoist play is related to a hermeneutic play, aiming at a certain fusion of horizons, or are there possibilities of reimagining educational system with Daoist humor and play? Especially in the post-pandemic era, it seems that a higher level of awareness is urgently needed in this complex interconnecting world. So I'm wondering if Dr. Wang could elaborate more on the playfulness, spinning the wheel of peace as a spiral process in the field of education. So thank you very much.
Thank you. You have played with play, really inspiring me. Well, can you get your questions back? Because I can't remember all the questions. But I want to acknowledge that really this idea of play, I got it from William Dahl when I did the life history project with him and highlight his pedagogy, because the play is not only, like you say, it's not only about doing something, but playing with ideas is very much dear to his pedagogy and his heart, and playing with relationship is something that he's really good at doing as well. But I'm really intrigued by the link you make between the Nuwa, the goddess of Chinese mythology, in terms of her creation act as a play. That's just a wonderful link, and I really appreciate that. And certainly play is associated with creativity, also associate with transcendence. So the transcendent playful act of the goddess, that's something that I'm going to remember, because I didn't make that connection before. Your question, hermeneutic play, if a Taoist play is related to that, yeah, they can be related in the sense of being transformed in the process of communing. So the Gadamer's play emphasize on the experiencing of play, not so much about players. That's resonant with Daoism. The only one thing that I do want to mention is that the Daoism is so skeptical about the role of language and how verbal concepts confine rather than reveal reality. So in that sense, I think it's hermeneutic aspects would be more tied with aesthetic intuition rather than textual analysis, and also the meditative creativity, direct experience as well. Are there possibilities of reimagining educational system with a human humor and play? I just taught a book. It's called World Peace and Other Fourth Grade Achievements. This teacher, Hunt, he made up this game and played with kids for 8 weeks, for decades. But it's a prolonged engagement, not just something that they play one day and it ends. It's like 8 weeks. So 4 countries and United Nations representative, weather goddess, and I like that he made the weather as the goddess rather than the god. And so, with all kinds of elements, and set up the condition that only when everybody wins, the World Peace Games win. And so the kids play for 8 weeks. If you haven't read the book, I highly recommend it. It's just amazing how 9-year-old kids can solve the problem that adults cannot. So that's a perfect example of play, so they have the school children. They have the chance to play in small groups and utilizing all the materials, addressing all the 50-word crisis throughout the 8 weeks, and come up with things to win the game. And that's really show that it can be done, and it's already being done in that way. And these children, as they grow up, they benefit from such play tremendously in the way that they approach life and their growth process. So we don't have a lot of time, so I'll just use this one example to say we actually can do that. A higher level of awareness, it's refers to the, we have to be able to see the relationship between parts and the whole, and look at the whole as a together as well. So it's not in the sense of so much advancement, but in the sense of being able to see everything, including all the components, including the web, whatever the web we are situated in, and to be able to see the relationships and how to deal with it. The spinning the wheel of peace as a spiral process. There's another story, very briefly, say there's a monkey keeper. He brings chestnuts to monkeys. And he said, okay, I'm going to give you 3 chestnuts in the morning, 4 chestnuts in the afternoon, and all the monkeys are angry. And then he said, okay, I'm going to give you 4 chestnuts in the morning and 3 chestnuts in the afternoon, and all the monkeys are happy. The story really, that's where the wheel of peace come from. That you sit at the center of the wheel, you can go either way. There's no wrong way, according to the situation, going back to attunement and improvisation, according to what the situation calls for. You don't need to be angry as monkeys. You don't have to change the reality, but conflicts can be dissolved and solved. So that's what I'm referring to in terms of the well of peace. I think we are about time.
Well, would you like a quick follow-up, Dr. Ma?
Oh, I really appreciate Dr. Wang's response, and especially you use the stories and to unpack and also to demonstrate what is involved. And I personally love the monkey story because I used to interpret it differently, because I mean, Daoism is kind of with the negative implications in Chinese. So the interpretation, as you said, has different like differences, but you do not say which is right, which is wrong, but you complicate the interpretations, and this has been very, very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ma. Well, we're almost at time, but we could have a quick question or comment from someone who hasn't spoken yet. Is there a comment or question? Just speak up.
And you can put it in chat too.
Yes, that's true. And if you don't have a chance, you can also write Dr. Wang at Oklahoma State. All right, then. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Wang, Dr. Smith, Dr. Lee, and Dr. Ma, for a very intriguing event. I think one worthy of such an intriguing book. Thanks very much, and we wish everyone well.